I'm 95 years old. I am sitting in a room that smells of sterilized linen and the faint metallic tang of a radiator that hasn't been bled since 2014. From this height, from the very edge of the cliff, I can see the entire valley of your life, and I have to tell you, it looks like a graveyard of laters. I've buried my parents. I've buried my brother Arthur, who used to whistle through his teeth when he was thinking. I've buried my wife Eleanor, whose skin felt like cooling wax toward the end. I am the last one standing in a forest of felled trees, and the view from here is brutal. It's honest because I no longer have anyone left to lie to. You think you're busy. You think your to-do list is a sacred text. You think that 15-minute gap between your meetings or that half hour after work is a disposable commodity, like a plastic wrapper you toss in the bin. You're wrong. You are hemorrhaging the only currency that matters, and you're doing it with a smile on your face. Let me ask you a few things, and don't you dare look away. How many times today did you check a piece of glass in your pocket instead of looking at the person breathing across the table from you? When was the last time you heard the specific cadence of your mother's laugh without a screen between you? If I told you exactly how many Saturdays you have left, not a vague decades, but a hard, cold number, would you still be sitting there with that look of bored indifference? Or would you finally stop acting like you're immortal? You aren't. You're a flickering candle in a windstorm, and you're obsessed with the wax instead of the flame. The night the clock stopped, it was March 14th, 1976, a Tuesday. The air in the living room was heavy with the smell of floor wax and the pot roast Eleanor had made for dinner. I can still hear the rhythmic thump-thump of the dryer in the basement. I was 35, an age where you believe time is a lake you're swimming in, rather than a pipe that's leaking. The evening news was on. Walter Cronkite was talking about the primary elections. I was leaning back in my recliner, the one with the scratchy tweed fabric, clutching a cold beer. I felt like I had earned that silence. I had worked 10 hours. I was tired. The phone rang. It was the old rotary on the wall. It was my mother. She lived 3 towns over. She sounded small, not sick, just present. She started telling me about a bird she'd seen at her feeder, a cardinal that looked too red to be real. She wanted to know if Eleanor's garden was starting to show life yet. I looked at the television. Cronkite was moving on to a segment about the economy. I felt a prickle of irritation. This was my 15 minutes. This was my time to decompress. "Mom," I said, my voice tight with that charcoal cold impatience we only use for the people who love us most. "The news is on. I've had a long day. Can I just call you back this weekend? We'll have a real talk then." "Oh," she said. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing, a tiny whistling sound through her nose. "Of course, honey. I didn't mean to interrupt. Enjoy your program." "I will. Love you, Mom." I hung up. I sat back down. I watched the news. I forgot the cardinal. I forgot the garden. I chose 15 minutes of flickering blue light over the woman who had carried me. I told myself I was protecting my peace. I told myself that later was a vault where I could store her voice. She died 11 days later. A massive stroke while she was hanging laundry. The neighbors found her in the grass. The sheets were still damp. I never got that weekend. I realized, standing at her casket in the rain, that I had traded a piece of her soul for a news segment I couldn't even remember 48 hours later, the waiting room trap. That phone call in 1976 wasn't a single event, it was a blueprint. I didn't just hang up on my mother, I hung up on my life. By 1980, the later I'd promised myself had become a thick, suffocating fog. I was a rising executive now. I traded the smell of garden dirt for the scent of expensive leather and stale coffee in boardrooms. I had 2 young children, Mark and Sarah. Mark had this habit of tugging on my sleeve when I got home, his fingers sticky with peanut butter, wanting to show me a Lego tower or a drawing of a space-bound dog. Later, Mark, I'd say, eyes glued to the flickering stock ticker on the screen. Daddy has to finish this report, 15 minutes, okay. But 15 minutes became an hour became bedtime. Bedtime became a decade. I was drowning in a sea of immediate rewards. The thrill of a closed deal felt like a hit of adrenaline, while the quiet murmur of my daughter reading a book in the corner felt like background noise, something I could always tune back into eventually. I was choosing the car repairs, the promotion, and the social status over the people who were actually in the room. I was a victim of my own brain, preferring the shiny nickel-plated now over the gold-plated someday. By 1990, the silence in my house was no longer a reprieve. It was a consequence. Eleanor and I sat at a dining table that cost more than my first car, but we didn't speak. We ate to the sound of silver clinking against china. I had spent 20 years too tired to be present, and now the woman who used to tell me about her day just stared at her reflection in the wine glass. Her hands, once so quick to reach for mine, stayed folded in her lap like cold stone. I did the math once, sitting in the dark after she fell asleep. It's a calculation that still keeps me awake at 3:00 a.m. A human life has roughly 58,400 possible 15-minute blocks of connection. I had been married to Eleanor for 30 years at that point. That's over 1 million minutes of potential intimacy. I looked at my ledger. I realized I had spent maybe 200 of those 15-minute blocks actually looking into her eyes, not at a screen, not at a menu, not at a child, but at her. I had lost 58,200 chances to know the woman I claimed to love. I thought I was saving time. I thought I was being efficient, but time isn't a bank account. It's a waterfall. You don't get to keep what you don't catch. I was standing at the bottom with a thimble, wondering why I was thirsty. The pattern repeated until it became my identity. I told myself I'd start being a family man after the kids were in college, then I'd do it after they were married, then after the first grandchild. But the after never arrived because I had spent 40 years practicing the art of being absent. I had optimized my life for a future that was always 6 inches beyond my reach. I was 1 degree off course in 1959, and by 1999, I had landed in a completely different country than the one I intended to inhabit. I wasn't a patriarch. I was a stranger with a pension. I remember the smell of Eleanor's perfume on the day she left for the hospital for the last time. It was lavender and something sharp like ozone. I reached for her hand, and for the first time in years, she didn't squeeze back. "I'll be there in 15 minutes, I told her, checking my watch. I had a conference call I couldn't miss. "I'll see you later." She looked at me, truly looked at me, and her eyes were full of a grief so deep it made my heart stop. "David," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves, "there is no later. There's only what you threw away. Stop the video. Stop the scrolling. Stop the reflexive twitch of your thumb. Put your phone down on a flat surface and look at your hands. Turn them over. Look at the lines in your palms, the pulse in your wrist. That meat and bone is currently expiring. You are sitting in the middle of a burning house and you're preoccupied with the upholstery. Two versions of you exist in this moment, the one staring at this screen and the 95-year-old version of you, me, standing at the end of your hallway, screaming at you to wake up. I am the ghost of your future, and I am telling you that the important things you are doing right now are nothing but ash. You think you are being productive. You aren't. You are being cowardly. It is easier to answer an email than to look your partner in the eye and ask, "Are you lonely?" It is easier to work an extra hour for a bonus than to sit in the silence with your aging father and realize he's shrinking. You are hiding in your busyness because reality is heavy, and later is a lie that lets you sleep at night. I am giving you for directives, not suggestions, commands. If you ignore them, you deserve the silence that is coming for you. First, the 15-minute audit. Pick one person. Today, you will give them 15 minutes of undivided monastic attention. No phone in the room, no TV in the background. Look at the texture of their iris. Notice how their breath hitches when they talk about something they fear. Why it's hard. It forces you to realize how little you actually know the people you live with. What it reveals that you have been a ghost in your own home. Second, the mortality calendar. Go to a piece of paper and draw a grid of 4,000 squares. Each square is a week of a 77-year life. Cross off the ones you've already used. Why it's hard. It turns a vague concept into a physical, shrinking territory. What it reveals that the long game is almost over. Third, the unsent confession. Call the person you've been meaning to talk to and admit the specific way you've been absent. Don't say I've been busy. Say I chose my ego over our connection and I'm sorry. Why it's hard. It kills your pride. What it reveals whether the relationship is still alive or if you're just guarding a corpse. Fourth, the sensory anchor. Tonight, when you eat, describe the temperature, the scent, and the texture of the food to someone. Why it's hard. It forces you out of your head and into the physical world. What it reveals how much of your life you spend completely disembodied, living in a digital abstraction. I have 14,600 days of a pension I don't care about and a house full of furniture that no one wants. I would trade every stick of mahogany for one Tuesday in 1976. I would trade my lungs for the smell of that floor wax and the sound of my mother's whistle. You still have the currency. I am bankrupt. Look at the clock on your wall. That tick you just heard? That was a 15-minute block beginning. You've already wasted 30 seconds of it reading this. What are you going to do with the other 14 and a half? Go, before the room goes dark. Close the door on your way out.